Welcome to episode 119 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast made up of the opinions of four of the greatest minds ever to discuss Linux and the history of people discussing Linux. I am Noah, and with me today are my three mutant members of the Linux Podcasting Avenger team. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
And, very well. And Zeb, how are things going?
Yeah, I'm doing all good, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. And I can't remember the green girl's name. That's what I was going to insult.
She-Hulk?
I'm fine with She-Hulk. I mean,
She-Hulk, how's it going?
I'll rock it. I'm doing awesome, man. Doing great.
So, Michael, I'm guessing that things have been busy this week. How was Denver?
It was actually pretty awesome. I got to do some skiing, and I got sunburned while doing skiing. That was great. And I got to check out the System 76 warehouse, and that was pretty cool. So I got a tour there. And also, just to kind of like do it, like if you're curious about the sunburn, I have a shirt that people didn't believe me, but it's totally true now. See, it says the sun is trying to kill me, and I have proof
right there. Yeah,
I have proof now.
Ryan, have you been outdoors?
No, that place is scary. Don't go outdoors. Trust me, you get burnt and things.
You get burnt.
Like Michael was saying.
I did some skiing, and I fell a lot.
Of which, do we have some pictures of the skiing? Because rumor has it you have a selfie stick, Michael.
I do have a selfie stick, but I'm not good enough to actually.
Can you explain why you might have a selfie stick?
I don't understand what you mean.
Because inside he is truly a teenage girl. That's it.
Wait, but who wouldn't have a selfie stick? That's what I'm confused.
Not only does he dye his hair, he dyes his hair and he uses Rebecca Black Linux. That's all you. And he has a selfie stick.
Wait, that's the only Linux distro a self-respecting person would use.
See,
so
what I mean?
I don't know what you're talking about. Right, but actually, the reason why this is good is because this is an adapter for your phone to attach to a tripod. So you could actually
dongle. They call that a dongle.
It's not a dongle.
It's a dongle. It's one part that connects thing to another thing. That's a dongle.
It's dangling, so it's a dongle.
This part, ignore this part, okay? Ignore this. I'm talking about just the attachment piece, like that you can.
So for those who can't see the visual right now, Michael has a selfie stick, but it's not just any selfie stick. Noah can confirm it is the cheapest kind of selfie stick that you would get out of a dollar bin at a dollar store.
If you remember way back in the 80s when teachers used to use like the telescoping antenna pointers that they would use to point, it's like one of those that he kind of hot glued.
But I got it for free, and the reason I got it was this part.
Yeah, well, we know you didn't pay for it. I mean,
that's ridiculous.
What are you talking about? But anyway, the whole
dongle, noun, a small device used by Michael Tennell to connect one thingy to another thingy.
You're
straight from dictionary.com.
You're making fun of how cheap it is. It just kind of broke right here too.
Oh no!
See the little pieces broke off.
I'm gonna send you a real selfie stick.
I cannot believe Michael has a selfie stick. But how was System 76? Let's get to that. That's an important one.
The System 76 was really cool. It was a cool tour. Like I got to check out some stuff. What was really interesting is that I found out some stuff that I didn't know. There's this the Thelio has a lot of detail that they don't really talk about. That if you look at the intake and the outtake fan parts, they have like custom solar systems, and the one on the back of the machine is the position of the solar system when the Unix epochs thing happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's also they had the inside of the case at the bottom. They have the solar system position where the date of the beginning of System 76. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there that they have like a lot of detail. They also have like Morse code on the side of the machine and stuff that they don't really talk about, but it's really cool if they should do like something they should talk about on their website or something because it is pretty cool.
Did you get to see the lasers?
Yeah,
they did let me see the lasers, but not play with them. Unfortunately, I did ask, but unfortunately, I was not able to.
Couldn't put it in your eye just to see how powerful it is.
So
no, it's cutting metal. I don't want to put it in my eye.
That's a myth. Zeb, what have you been up to this week?
Well, I've actually had a pretty good week, and through doing nothing special, I've now got Solus back in my distro lineup, and it's working with UEFI. Don't know how, don't know why. It just works. And then the icing on the cake is Antigos Cinnamon is back.
That's awesome.
And the mysterious disappearing Windows doesn't happen anymore. So I don't know whether that was an Nvidia fix because we've gone 4.18 or a Cinnamon update. I'm just happy that it's all running and working. So it's good.
I love it. Ryan, what have you been up to?
Well, I'm on AMD, so I don't get that chance of watching things break and then be happy again when they finally get fixed. Because
your life is boring.
Yeah, it's just boring. No, but I've been working on setting up. We were gifted a Lenovo all-in-one PC, and it was
Really?
running Windows 10. And the person gave it to me and said it had a Core i5. It was an older generation, but not terrible. 8 gigabytes of RAM. And they said, look, it's so slow, I can't even use it. You can just have it. And so what do? I wipe it, put Linux on it.
Yeah, absolutely, you do.
The thing is screaming. Now, it was slow. It was so slow, you would click the file manager in Windows 10, and you would literally wait for up to 15 seconds before it would load. Now, it is super snappy and fast, and so much so that my kids, of course, when they saw me repairing it, were like, can we have this computer? Because they're on older laptop. And I was like, sure. It's touchscreen and all of that.
Did you really? Did you give it to
yeah, I gave it to them. My kids now have another computer, and it's running Pop! OS. And
that's
very, very impressive.
And was it Intel graphics or?
Yeah, it's just an Intel graphics in there. So again, it works right out of the box, which is beautiful. And It's got the speakers built in. It's got the nice touch screen too for the kids, which they absolutely love. And of course, I've been playing with my FreeNAS server and learning.
Yes. Oh, how is that? Give me an update. How is that working?
Dude, it's it's amazing. First of all, they set it up out of the box for me, thankfully. So I didn't have to go through the install process, although I had studied up on it all the way till the box.
It takes a lot of studying to stick that USB drive in there.
Yeah, and I realized it was like it's no difficulty to it at all. But I did study up on that because I was like, if this gets here and I don't know how to even turn it on, but they had done that for me. They had set that portion up. So now it's been a process of just learning the ins and outs of it. Now, Synology NAS, which is what I'm familiar with, very easy to set up out of the box. Boom, you're done. You want it to do a backup, whatever. The FreeNAS is a little more intricate, right? There's a lot more to set up within it. There's a lot more things to learn. It's also far more powerful at the end.
Right, and flexible.
With it. Yeah.
Are you going to go with ZFS?
I am on ZFS.
That's good.
Is that good? Okay. All right.
No, that's good. No, that is good. So as tradition, we ask our listeners to guess where Noah is when Noah's not here. So Zeb offered some extra bonus points for the most original answer. Here were your guesses last week. Noah is obviously trying to get the Infinity Gauntlet so that he can snap his fingers and make all of the distros disappear in order to bring peace and balance to FOSS. Everything's gone but CentOS and Ubuntu. Second is, regarding Noah, my theory is he went water skiing, hit an iceberg, and he's pretty cold in North Dakota, don't you know? Here's what's funny about that. We actually got snow this week. It is, watch says still April. Not quite. We're almost into May, and we still have snow. And probably my favorite one, and number 3, one of Michael's clones kidnapped Noah, held him hostage, hoping to replace him on the show.
So, Noah, it looks like you have a different background this week. So,
it is a bit different background. I am at Linux Fest Northwest, and that's why it's a different background. I see what you did there. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. The thing about Linux Fest is, and especially the fests over the cons, right? You go here not necessarily for the talks, although the talks are stellar. I come here for the community, right? And so I spent all last night hanging out with people, talking about Linux, getting people introduced to Linux, helping people install Linux, and I don't know how this happened exactly, but somehow in the process of serving cake with System 76 for a barbecue that they put on outside of Linux Fest, somehow I wound up in drag. Don't know how that happened, but it happened.
Well, the pictures are all over the internet. In fact, I think it was up to 6,000 retweets already going through. So, Noah, this may be a way to boost your presence in the Linux community by continuing to wear those type of things.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make sure that every year I put on a pink bikini and
sell Linux
and serve some cake to some Linux folks.
I love it. Good for you, man. Good for you.
So just before you get any ideas, no, it's not happening itself. Okay, boys, it's not happening.
Zeb walks away. I'm going back.
I have the blue bikini for self.
Yeah.
Okay, pink one is Linux Fest Northwest. Blue one is self.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, let's get into some emails here. So we have a new email this week, guys. Thank you very much for adding your comments about accessibility to your news about the new version of MX. I have not heard of MX, and I was listening to the podcast thinking I would have to check it out with all the attendant Googling for info about whether it is accessible. And then bingo, out of pops exactly kind of brief comments about accessibility I've been wishing for. I will take the time to contact the devs to see if I can help in any way to either get Orca to work or to make some other additions to get around it. I love that. I love that they, want to go out there and help resolve the issue, not just say, hey, there is a problem there with, this accessibility. I hope somebody else goes out and fix it, but they're actually taking the cadence to come out there and fix it themselves, which is awesome. And I'm sure Dolphin will appreciate you reaching out as well. For example, he goes on, if an SSH server was running out of the box, it would be possible to boot it and then SSH in from another accessible machine and tinker. Please remember to do this each time you review another distro. It only takes a minute extra or so to either say yay or nay on the subject of whether a distro is accessible or not. Thanks again, Mike. So this is interesting. We've received several emails from the community asking about, can we make sure we cover accessibility when we're talking about a distro? Mm-hmm. So this week and last week, we have started to attempt this, and the week before that, so the last 3 weeks, we've attempted this. And I can tell you it's very difficult, which leads to a problem that I didn't know existed until our community reached out to us about it, which is nobody, for the most part, except for your main distro flavors, actually even have a section discussing their accessibility. Yeah. So the only way I can actually find out if it has accessibility options or not is to install a distro or burn it onto an ISO and try to look at it for myself. And unfortunately, I don't know all the things to look for, but I know the installer being able to read, zoom in, zoom out, magnification capabilities, those type of things are important. So I'm looking for those, but it is way more difficult than it should be. It should be a simple Google search on a distro. They have an accessibility section, which should be a key component, in my opinion, of every documentation, and say whether they have it or not. And it's fine if they don't have it and there's an opportunity for people to contribute to add one for it, but at least let people know, because it's painful. It takes me now twice as long to put a distro in the news because nobody's documenting this simple fact.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the shame is there are a lot of distros out there with accessibility options, because with my 4K monitors, one of the first things I do is I go and find that accessibility section and tick the box that says large text. Then you don't have to worry about minute headings on all of the windows. So it's there, but as you rightly says, trying to find where it's written and what it's for, it's just non-existent.
So we have a lot of devs that listen to this show. So my ask is, please add in some information into your documentation about accessibility on your website and in your documents, so that individuals who rely on knowing this information to even use your distro know. And number two, I think it is an important thing, and this is an area where the community's reached out to us on an area to improve in that we've embraced. So we will keep trying to talk about this stuff in the future, but thank you for reaching out and telling us about it.
So this goes to prove that we just want to hear from you, our listeners. Send in your favorite Linux software or tips or tricks. We'd love to know about what tool makes your Linux experience amazing. And as we talked about before, is there perhaps a specific Linux topic that you would like us to cover? And this just proves that we do listen, because you guys mentioned accessibility and we're now trying to cover it. So keep those emails coming and send them to comments@destinationlinux.org. Okay, so on to the distro news. And in the wake of 1904 coming out, and I'm not quite sure whether this particular OS came out before or after 1904.
Right after.
But we've got it was just prior, was it?
No,
okay.
It's like it came out like within the next day or something.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Well, Pop OS goes 1904. And while it's not going to be possible for us to cover every single distro based upon Ubuntu that's going to go 1904, Pop OS has had a resurgence of popularity just recently. So we wanted to cover some of the changes they're making in addition to what comes packed in the 1904.5 kernel. But initially, there are some unique highlights of Pop OS that are included in this release. So they now have a slim mode option that maximizes your screen real estate by reducing the height of the header on the application windows.
Yes.
Yes, very nice.
That's awesome. Yep. And one of the major problems with stock GNOME.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And they've also now got a dark mode that gives your applications a relaxing ambience for nighttime viewing. Both dark mode and slim mode can be activated in the appearance settings menu. Ryan, there must be loads more. Tell us about a few of them.
Yeah, there is loads more in here. They have updated a course, which I know you'll like, the NVIDIA driver from the 410 to 418, which provides a lot of good hardware and stability fixes, as well as improves GNOME shell animations for them. Besides some enhancements, they've also put some, bug fixes into place. Packaging for both CUDA 10.1 and TensorFlow 1.13.1 toolkits are in place. Popsicle, the installation media creator for Pop! OS, has been improved. And because we want to talk about accessibility here, and I installed Pop! OS on my son's computer, I went to look at this. The only info regarding accessibility on Pop! OS's website is under keyboard shortcuts portion of the manual that I could find. They have toggle screen reader, toggle magnifier, zoom in and zoom out options. I did not see any accessibility options in the installation media at all when I booted the ISO. So that is an area perhaps that they could improve in, or if it's there and I just couldn't find it, then perhaps they could make it something that's a little more easy to identify. And also, again, like we're talking about for every distro, I think they need to just add a section saying accessibility and list out all the features that they have there. But otherwise, look, Pop! OS has gained a ton in popularity. If you're kind of following social media and things out there, people are really taking a second look at it because it has a very unique GNOME implementation, just a lot of nice tweaks, and even things like the wallpaper and the themes that they use make Pop! OS just feel very, very modern in comparison to other implementations of GNOME out there. So it's definitely something I recommend taking a look at if you haven't checked out Pop! OS in a while.
Yeah.
Noah, what are your thoughts?
Well, just before we get to Noah could probably answer this one for me. One of the things that I've never seen before is refresh install. Mm-hmm. So you can apparently reinstall Pop! OS over the top of what you've already got, and it doesn't mess up your home directory and all the other bits and pieces. So how is that going to work from a technical standpoint?
Any distribution is capable of doing that, right? If you don't, when you go to install, you're going to create a file system and then you're going to put directories on top of it, depending on how you partition the drive or how you redo that file structure. If I blow away everything in the file structure except for /home, I am going to preserve /home and I will redo everything else, the bootloader, the kernel, all of that stuff. If you could also do it with just a separate partition altogether. But, this is really, I think the important part there is this is what happens when you have a company that takes the time to develop an operating system for their customers, because System 76's goals align with what their customers want. Mm-hmm. And so if you want an easy to use, ship from the store, a computer that runs Linux, guess what? This Lenovo ThinkPad runs Linux out of the box. So I'm getting that with both brands. What I'm not getting with the ThinkPad and what I am getting with the System 76 is the fact that that computer is going to be built and software is going to be put onto it such that I can reinstall my operating system as a recovery mode, just like I would any other computer. And because of the nature of Linux being everything as a file on Linux, it gives us some additional flexibility that you wouldn't have in a Windows file system.
Yeah, that's true. And it's mainly cool because they took the time to actually create this recovery partition structure so that even if it doesn't, like, by default, any distro could do it, but I can't really think of any off the top of my head that has it built in by default. So this is really cool that they're actually adding it to it. So if you do, like, some people will say that, after a certain amount of time they do a fresh install so they can get rid of all the clutter and stuff like that. It doesn't really happen that bad on Linux anyway, but it's nice that if you wanted the option to kind of have a fresh install while still having all the stuff that you created over that amount of time, you can still have it. So that's really cool that they did it.
And the reason why I asked about this is because one of the biggest things that I hear being asked of the people on the forums is, did you do a fresh install or did you install over the top of your existing root and home partitions? Because a lot of problems occur when you've reinstalled an OS, left your original home partition. So in your .config and your .local and all the other stuff is configurations from a previous install. So they must be doing something that negates that complication. Because if you don't go back in and reinstall those programs, then you've got unnecessary clutter in your .config or your .local. So I thought that was a really good selling point for Pop! OS.
Definitely.
So we have some slightly unfortunate news and kind of maybe some positive news depending on how you look at it. Scientific Linux has now announced that they are coming to an end. Fermilab maintained Scientific Linux for many years, and they've decided that they're going to discontinue. They're still going to maintain it for the length of the year that they said that they would, years that they said they would. So if you're still using it, you can continue using it. But they've said that they're no longer going to make new versions, and have decided that they will be using CentOS as their like scientific computing base distro. So they'll still be making some in computing environments, and they'll still be making some stuff for Scientific Linux, but instead of having their own distro, they're going to be setting it on top of CentOS. The announcement stated that they're looking to the future of collaboration, and part of that is unifying their infrastructure with other labs and institutions, which CentOS will allow them to accomplish. So I think that this is kind of like it's interesting because it's interesting because we talked about this on a stream that I was on about like appliance distros and how this was good, but how Scientific Linux was good for that type of purpose. But I think that this is a better approach because having CentOS, having all of these tools for all the different labs and everybody can collaborate for developing and improving those tools is definitely a much better approach because it has the potential of the community working together to provide something that is very specific use case that may not be getting as much attention as it previously could have. But they're doing this, they'll be able to do it a lot better.
But why create it in the first place? What was the issue that was occurring that no longer is? Is it?
So you have schools and you have research facilities that wanted to run software that was designed for RHEL, but they didn't want to. They couldn't or didn't want to pay for RHEL because they didn't feel like they needed a support infrastructure. And RHEL, being RHEL, said, hey, "Oh, that's fine. Here's the source code. Knock yourself out. Just take all of our trademark logos out." So they did, and they started. They essentially recompiled binary compatible versions of Red Hat as Scientific Linux, CentOS, so on and so forth. At some point, Red Hat looked up and went, wait a minute, those guys over Canonical, they give their software away for free, and they're people that use it, and now they're the number one provider on cloud platforms. You know what would be really great is if people would use Red Hat on the cloud. They probably don't want to pay $300 per year per subscription. Maybe we should have a free version that we give away. Although CentOS guys are doing exactly that. Great. Let's go over and throw money in their corner so that they can keep doing what they're doing. We'll just give them paychecks to do it.
So at the time, Scientific Linux, the CentOS wasn't around necessarily.
Yes,
at that.
Exactly.
No, I think no, that's not true. CentOS and Scientific Linux, both of them were binary recompiles of Red Hat, and they both coexisted at the same time.
I think they were created at the same time, so like there was like a very small gap where they had to choose. It wasn't like CentOS wasn't ready to do what Scientific Linux wanted at the time.
Right, but I guess my point was that they both set out to accomplish the same goal. CentOS just got a little bit more notoriety than Scientific Linux, and if you ask me, it's because Red Hat officially endorsed, even before they owned them, officially endorsed CentOS in all of their training materials. So if you went to a Red Hat certified training course, they would tell you to install CentOS Linux to practice on and to use in production if you needed something that didn't require a license. And it's interesting because that shift is evolving ever more. Today, Red Hat actually gives a free developer license for RHEL proper out. And so if you want to get an actual license and don't have the funds to pay for it, Red Hat actually even allows that. And then you can run RHEL proper with a developer account.
Nice. So let me ask, one of the things that this reminded me of a little bit, not making a direct comparison here, was Ubuntu Studio. And the reason is when I thought about Scientific Linux and I was looking into it, what I noticed is they have a ton of packages that are very specific to the scientific community. So if you were just coming into Linux, and utilizing it as your platform, you may not know all of those exist. When I went into Ubuntu Studio back when I learned Linux, I didn't know all these audio things exist. And that's why I loved Ubuntu Studio when I first used it, because even though there already is an Ubuntu version of Linux, this one had all of the audio stuff packaged there. So is this a case, though, with CentOS where they are going to move all the probably all the scientific programs exist there, but are they going to move it into a package so people who are getting into that realm have a simple way of just getting all of these apps, much like you would have had on a Scientific Linux.
Yeah, I think they're going to do like kind of they haven't really specified exactly what they're going to do as far as like abandoning all of their approaches as far as like making their own like ISO. They haven't talked about that. They're not going to make Scientific Linux as a separate entity anymore or a separate distro. They might still be releasing Scientific Linux as a base of CentOS. You still get the pre-default installed stuff. So if you've never heard of it, you don't know what tools they are, they might still give you the option. While at the same time, you could still install the stuff into CentOS. I think that's what they're going for, but they haven't really specified if they're going to continue making ISOs or not, or if they're just going to have an installer that you can put onto CentOS. So I think it'd be either way. It'd be useful for the other labs and other research institutions to benefit from. But I do think that if you're just now getting into it,
I don't know if I agree with that.
What do you mean?
Well, because we spend one of our primary customers or one of the places that we do a lot of Linux support for is the university systems, right? And all of those are doing research, and almost all of them are all of the software manufacturers that manufacture research software. Nobody is writing for Scientific Linux, right? Like those packages are written for RHEL or RHEL binary compatible systems. I don't know if there's really anything in 2019 that Scientific Linux is doing that any other RHEL clone wouldn't do or RHEL proper wouldn't do.
Well, I just meant like the beneficial to provide people who are like not a part of an institution that or might want to implement this in a like an institution that doesn't have anything right now and they want to, like a small one that's trying to implement something, they could get the benefit of having
CentOS?
They could get the benefit of having CentOS and Scientific Linux stuff on top of it. So like if they made an ISO that's just CentOS that has the stuff, they could get that as like an introductory thing. But at the same time, they'd still, because they're using CentOS as the base, you still get the benefit of all the binary compatibility of Red Hat. So I think that it's I don't know if they're doing it or not. I kind of hope if they provide both options for people who need it and people who don't, because that would be much better for like brand new institutions that are trying to implement Linux in some way. So I hope that that's what they're going to do. But I have
one more question to poke the bear a little bit here. In this case, perhaps in this conversation, but I've noticed and this is just gut feeling because I've not done research on it. But you all have been in Linux much longer than me. One of the big complaints I've heard from Linux, fair or not, I'm not saying it's a legitimate complaint, but one of the complaints you hear is there's too much choice. There's too many distros, there's too many flavors and spin-offs and stuff. It seems like, in my opinion, in the last couple of years, we're starting to cover a lot of news where some of these flavors are converging and ending. Is this the start of something bigger? Are we going to start seeing this happen at an accelerated rate now?
No, I understand. You don't want to stay better. You don't want to say the word better. And I understand why you don't want to say the word better, but the truth is it's better. We are at a point where any idiot can spin a distro, right? Any idiot. The tools are widely enough available and Linux is popular enough that any idiot can sit down and throw some code together, put some packages together, and spin up an ISO and offer it for download. And the problem with doing that is it is detrimental to new Linux users because they come in and they look at something and say, oh, look, there's a distro that does XYZ. That's the distro that I should use because I want to do XYZ. And then you come and find out distro XYZ is really just an Ubuntu base that the distro maintainer never updates and package 4 tools on top of it because that's the 4 tools that guy uses, and it's some piece of crap spin-off by one guy that kind of haphazardly does it in the community. And I think that's way more detrimental to us as a whole community than it's ever been helpful. There are very few esoteric distros that are truly a benefit to everybody out there. Now there are some, right? Like I think Kali Linux, I guess esoteric might not be the right term, but purpose-specific distros, like Kali Linux or Clonezilla or any of those appliance-like utilities. Yeah. Some of those are okay and good, and I'm glad we have them. But by and large, every time somebody has a different workflow does not necessarily mean that we should have a different distro for it.
I mean, I would agree with that, but I think the fragmentation is both a benefit and a curse. So like it has some benefits of having those appliance structures like the Kodi LibreElect style stuff, and then we have the benefits of all the other appliance based things. It is good that we have those in certain aspects, but there are a ton of distros that are just, they don't need to exist. I mean, you said that there's certain workflow that they have. I've seen distros that only exist because they have a different theme. And like, why? Just don't even bother.
Well, is it, on your show, Noah, when I hear your interviews, and even on our show, when we talk to developers and say, why do this spinoff? Why did you create this? One of the top answers I generally hear relates to, well, I tried to get this particular distro to do XYZ, or for them to implement this type of feature that I needed, and they refused when I went on the dev forums. They weren't interested. They wouldn't listen to me. So I went off and created my own. So is that a situation that's ever going to get resolved? Because you've always in Linux have people that are, over the main distros. If let's say we got down to 3 or 4 that maybe, somebody's doing it better, but they just don't want to do it because they don't want to maintain it. They don't see the vision. I mean, isn't that a way that we're pushing Linux forward through this?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. We wouldn't have gotten to where we are today, and Linux wouldn't be as successful as it is today if we didn't have competition, right? So you can't. I'm not advocating that we eliminate competition in any stretch of the imagination, but one of the, I guess where I come to, how I would answer that question is this: if you see a hole in the community and you want to try and fill it, I don't have any beef with that. Knock yourself out. In fact, we would never have things like Clonezilla. We'd never have things like Kali Linux if somebody didn't say, hey, you know what? It's a real pain in the tuchus to configure Debian or to configure Ubuntu to be a penetration testing distro. It requires us to install a bunch of utilities and tiny little one-off pieces of software. It also requires special configuration of the network interface. It's also one of the few times you want to run as the root user. Like, there's all of these things that we need to be able to do penetration testing that we should probably try its own distro. If they were listening to me and my advice and said, well, Noah says don't make distros just because for a certain workflow, the Linux community would be a lot worse off, right? So that advice has to be taken with a grain of salt. But if tomorrow you wake up and all of the penetration, the entire market is using a stock Ubuntu install and putting their own tools on top of it, you have to wake up, smell the coffee, and say, hey, listen, stop trying to talk people into your distro and start making distros for those that don't have them. I had a conversation, this is a couple years ago, and a guy came up to me and he asked me, he said, how can I, here's my distro, I spun it up. How do you think I could go about getting people to use it? And aside from the enormity of the fact that he wanted to be, the next de facto Linux desktop distro, which is a big feat in and of itself, I asked him to really consider the question, why? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want people to use your distro over Ubuntu? What's wrong with Ubuntu being the de facto distro? And he didn't have an answer for me. And that really told me all I needed to know is a lot of these people approach these subjects as in, well, how can I get people on my boat? And the question we should be asking is, where are the holes in the water that need some boats for people to get into? Right. So I guess that's my answer back to you. I'm not saying we stifle competition. I'm not saying that isn't what makes Linux better. I'm just saying we tend to go about that in the wrong way, and it tends to fracture the community, and it tends to do more harm in the long run than good because you wind up with people all over the place.
Well, what we're doing is, in a lot of cases, it seems like a situation that could be solved with a simple script or grouping applications together into a single package versus creating the whole wheel and respinning your own version of a entire distro versus just packaging a bunch of software that the scientific community needs, or the audio community needs, or whatever, or creating a simple install script, and it's simpler to maintain for
way
people,
more valuable to the community.
Absolutely. But by the same token, though, you might have people out there who aren't comfortable offering their services to the likes of Ubuntu or Manjaro or whoever you'd like to do, but they want to get into Linux deeper. So they come along, they take, I'll tell you what, I like that base, but I'd like it if it did this, that, and the other. And they go along and they make their own distro for whatever reason. And then having done that for 2 or 3 years, they say, do you know what? I'm actually quite good at this. Hi, Ubuntu. This is some of the work I've done. Can I help you anywhere? And that's given them the confidence to then move on and contribute to another project. So I wouldn't like to see that go away entirely.
No, of course
I understand exactly where you're coming from.
So to qualify sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say a classic example of what Michael was talking about is there's a Voyager Linux out there, which is just a Ubuntu clone. And he openly admits that he took Ubuntu and just put his look and feel on it. But there are some really clever things that he does on his particular distro. Now, if he then decides to drop Voyager in a few years' time, he could quite easily then get in touch with Sean and say, hey, look, I've been making my own distro for a few years. Where can I help you out on now? So that's where I think some of the benefits could come through from these guys tinkering with this open source software.
I'll give you a perfect example of what Ryan is saying, and then I'll give a perfect example of what Zeb's saying. So, Ryan, we are when we set up broadcast appliances, the guy Fred Gleason, the guy who developed Rivendell, there's no Rivendell appliance distro, much to the chagrin or the a lot of people are unhappy about the fact that you can't just download an ISO and make a Rivendell appliance, right?
Right.
But the advantage to that is, and what Fred would tell you is that there are, if you want to buy an appliance, then he sells boxes and there's a premium for that. If you want to put the software on yourself, he offers exactly what you said, a script that goes through and pulls down from repositories everything you need, and then other scripts that go and configure the system to be used for broadcast. And I've come to appreciate that because it means I just have to carry my CentOS stick with me, and I can turn any CentOS box into a broadcast appliance. But to Zeb's point, one of the things that we're doing at Altispeed right at this very moment, in fact, I had a meeting with the guy at Linux Fest Northwest about this, is we are creating a distro for kiosk use. And it's not that there aren't distros out there that are designed for kiosk use. They just, in my opinion, are not as good as what we're going to do. And so we're going to try to compete in that space. But I'm not going to go out there and try to convince everybody that has a kiosk that ours is better. I'm going to create that software for our use case. And if it happens to take off and it organically happens to become more popular, and I think it probably will, than existing kiosk software out there, then I'm fine with that, and we'll continue to support it and make it for everybody. If not, we'll just keep it in-house. But I'm not going to go out and talk to people and say, hey, you know what you need to do? If you have a kiosk, you need to use our software because ours is better than the other guy. That I think is where the problem is.
Interesting. Well, good conversation, and I think it will be interesting to see in the future how many of these kind of distro flavor spinoffs that may not be necessary realize it's time to maybe call it quits and move their stuff into just a package onto another distro, a core distro, and go help out and build something along with appliance that's a little more popular and useful.
Mm-hmm.
A new Lenovo Edge server is out, and this thing is really cool. It is the SE350. Now, Lenovo has released some information on this server, and it is unique because of its small form factor. Now, my personal opinion is that this device is really not modeled after, that's the wrong way to put it, but this device comes in the wake of things like the Mac Mini, the Raspberry Pi, the Intel NUCs. All of these are small form factor PCs, and what manufacturers I think have caught on is that people like small machines that they can put everywhere, attach to the back of TVs, attach on the back of walls, put in broom closets, stuff like that. And with a height of 1.75 inches, a width of 8.1 inches, and a depth of 14.9 inches, this is a tiny little machine. And I personally will purchase one the second it becomes available for purchase. The reason is it's a small profile device, which means it can go on the back of any rack or mounted to the wall. And the truth is, in a lot of business environments, they don't want the overhead of a rack. If you have a rack, you have to have a PDU. If you have a PDU, you probably want a switch. If you have a switch, you probably want a patch panel. And by the time you get done with all of those things, now you're sitting at $400 or $500 just in infrastructure to mount a server in. There is something to be said about screwing the thing to the wall, plugging it into a wall plate, and calling it good.
Mm-hmm.
It has tamper resist. The chassis itself is tamper resistant. It seeks to be encrypted with self-destruction. Some other features include plug-and-go features that you don't need physical access to, Wi-Fi and LTE connections, a Xeon processor, up to 256 gigabytes of RAM, 16 terabytes, up to a 16 terabyte solid-state hard drive, and support for the Nvidia Tesla T4 for edge interfacing or AI deployment. So I think this is going to be a really competitive product. And like I say, I'll be purchasing. What do you guys think?
I was super excited to see this. You know, one of the implementations I thought of, Noah, is we were talking in Telegram about potential business opportunities. And that business opportunity, I thought of this perfectly, meaning, like you said, a lot of people who are starting out their businesses, their small business, they don't want to invest or even have the space for that matter. I remember my dad's first shop, you couldn't put a server rack in there if you wanted to. There wasn't enough space. but being able to mount something that's a powerful server, it's capable of doing very powerful tasks, especially when you look at the specs in here, as well as having enterprise grade level options within it that you can mount to a wall or mount several of them to a wall if you needed to, is amazing. The touch and go capability, plug and go capability, where if you have a situation where you're providing servers as a service and some services that you're pre-installing on there, you basically do the setup, you ship it to them. You don't have $5,000 in shipping costs because it's not a giant unit, and you ship it to them. They mount it to a wall, plug it in, and they're ready to go. Just very cool stuff that they're doing here. When I seen this, and then I looked over at my 29-inch by 19-inch server, I thought, I got to get one of these too, and just see how this compares, because the wife wouldn't be quite as mad with this little form factor server versus what I have. But yeah, I think it's very cool.
I know it says there's no pricing, but have we got any indicative amounts that it might come out at?
It's going to depend on how you probably stack the features in this thing.
Here would be my guess. I'm comparing this to, if you look at the Dell Optiplex 3020 series, it's almost an identical form factor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, this might be a little deeper, but it's a very similar form factor, we'll say. And so I would guess you're probably going to be in that $1,500 to $2,000 price range if I were a betting man, depending on how you configure it. Obviously, you put 256 gigs of RAM, you can about quadruple that price.
Yeah. But I love the LTE connectivity options as well that are.
They're
available.
going for appliances. That's what they're designing, and it's good because there aren't a lot of options out there for commercial enterprise grade stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so now on to some Team Green news. And Nvidia have released. Sorry?
Gross. Team Green.
Gross. Team Green. Team Green for the win all day long, boys.
Okay, all right.
Not this case.
So let's get on to the serious aspects of this particular news article, because Nvidia have released the Geforce GTX 1650. So they've announced the release of this video card, and it's going to come in at around $150. But of course, that does not include any of the new ray tracing capabilities for that price. This card is said to deliver double the performance of the old GTX 950 Maxwell, and can do so with only 75 watts. So this means that you can just buy this card, plug it into your computer, and not have to worry about any other power supplies, and away it goes. Now, I did ask myself, why are Nvidia going down this route? And I think it's because AMD have showed them the way. And although I'm a fanboy of Nvidia and I am Team Green through and through, I think if I was looking at this price range, I'd probably go for the 570 or the 580, because I think it's just a better deal. But they've realized that they might have captured the top end of the market, but there's an awful lot of work going on at that lower end. Now, I know you always look into these types of things, Ryan. So what's your impression of the 1650?
I was very excited actually at first that Nvidia is starting to play ball in this low to mid-range style cards. It's important from a competitive standpoint, and the fact is, while some of us have the abilities and to buy some of these very expensive cards, your average market consumer doesn't. Or even kids who are just getting into gaming and things, they don't have, when they compare that to a $400 PlayStation, to go out there and spend $700 on just a video card and play the same. It's not really equating, right? So I think AMD was smart to go after the market they went after, which was low to mid at first, until they could release things like they're starting to, and what will have come out, of course, later this year. And NVIDIA is taking note. I think you're going to have a lot more cards selling at this level, especially since Bitcoin is no longer at this current state profitable for mining for most people. So what you've seen before is everyone was getting these high-end cards, and NVIDIA and AMD both couldn't even keep them on the shelf. You couldn't buy them. And it wasn't because all these people suddenly had $700 for video cards. It was because people were creating massive server farms of video cards. They were buying thousands at a time to Bitcoin mine. And that's why the prices of them shot up. Now, NVIDIA doesn't have that advantage now. Now they're seeing the true value of their cards sitting out there at $700 and $1,000 and $1,600. And they're not flying off the shelf. In fact, when I was at Best Buy and Fry's the other day, they were all sitting there. They had tons of stock of these cards. You couldn't even find one 7-8 months ago in a store. So now I think Nvidia is smart. They're saying, okay, well, we need to go after the lower market here. Unfortunately, this card, from everything I've seen, is a complete bust. It is slower than the RX 570. It doesn't deliver near the performance that they should be, especially on a card that's coming out way later than the 570. And even the reviewers who are pro Nvidia and Team Green, which I do watch, Zeb, because I was Team Green at one point too, they basically are poo-pooing all over this card because it's just not, it's not even on the same level as the 570, which is actually cheaper.
And older and cheaper and does better.
Yeah.
There was one.
Do you know what the problem is? It's Nvidia, so people will just buy it.
Yeah, you're right.
That's possible. That's also true. But there's going to be there's all these YouTubers have said that it's just not even worth caring about. They even said that when one of them that I watched, he said that the title of the video was, "Is Nvidia even trying anymore?" Because there was this one. They got the card in like 2 weeks in advance of the actual release, but the drivers were not available, so they couldn't actually test anything. And they were like, well, why do they not give us the drivers? Maybe they're trying to hide something. And then he goes through and says, yes, they're trying to hide something. They're hiding a lot. It is some stuff that they're saying that, you know, the touring technology is included in this, except for the part that you actually care that it's there is not being used by the touring. It's being used by something else. I forgot what he said. But like they have so many things that are hiding that it's just, they're just hoping that the brand of Nvidia is enough to get people to buy this. But he said if you're going to buy something at this level, the 570 is cheaper, better, and even though it's older, it does everything better. He said, in comparison, it decimated the Nvidia card on every test that they did. And in one, they said, and specifically one test, they didn't actually show on the record because the Nvidia card didn't even work with it. It just crashed. So like,
now, Nvidia does have the capability. Yeah, it is interesting. Nvidia does have the capability, much like AMD, because AMD is not innocent here. They'll release a card and then 3 months later, there's a better driver and the thing kicks up in performance and is way better. So there is the possibility the 1650 will become a true competitor, and they just haven't unlocked its potential yet. But I don't see that as often in Nvidia as I do AMD, for instance.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, though. It continues to make me think that when you look at the new cards that are coming out, there's the new 7-nanometer GPUs and also CPUs, Ryzen 3 series, and other elements, Intel's potential graphic card coming into the market. All of those that I just said are likely to run into the same situation that we've run into with the Radeon 7, in which all of the drivers will be built into the kernel, and all of these distros that take 6 to 8 months to update their kernels in between versions, we're going to be leaving these cards out to dry unless there's something done where the hardware enablement stacks are moved faster into these older versions of the kernels for backwards compatibility, because Intel's about to enter this market as well, and they're going to do the same thing AMD is and release their drivers into the kernel. So there's a bigger problem here that I keep seeing, because AMD is capturing the market. Before, it was fine for a distro just to focus on NVIDIA because they owned 80-90% of the market. That's shifting quickly, and NVIDIA is bombing faster and faster and faster. And I really think that distros need to pay attention to AMD a little more.
I agree. It's also interesting that Nvidia is having this issue because they typically never had this problem. Their drivers were ready very quickly. They are actually more quickly available for Linux users now than the Windows people, and the Windows people are having issues. So it's just interesting that Nvidia is trying to keep up with AMD's, like, their push is getting so much, like, they're getting so much attention and so much stuff that it feels like Nvidia just kind of pushed this release before it was ready.
Yep. So next in our news is the Intel Cascade Lake processor, and specifically the benchmarks for this. So perhaps you're getting ready to upgrade your servers at work, or you're building a new server for your home. And if you have a comfortable budget, that is, you may be looking at the new Intel Cascade Lake processor family out there. And you might be asking yourself, should I install Windows on this new server with these new beautiful processors I just bought? Or should I install FreeBSD? Or should I install Linux? Let's just pretend here for a second, because we know the answer is always Linux. Yeah. But Phoronix has performed some benchmarks just to make sure, in case you were questioning, on the new Platinum 8280s. So there's 2 of these, which means in this system, the server he had set up, you have 56 cores and 112 threads. That is probably powerful enough to run SuperTuxKart. I'm not sure, but definitely some serious power there under there from a server standpoint. So just to summarize, I did rank these scores from best to worst in the various benchmarks, and I'm only going to read to you the top 2 in each of the segments. So doing some SQLite inserts, benchmarks, FreeBSD, OpenSUSE were the fastest out. And by the way, we're comparing FreeBSD, OpenSUSE, Ubuntu, Clear, CentOS, Windows Server, and Windows Server WSL. So the Linux layer within Windows are all in the benchmark. So FreeBSD, OpenSUSE was the fastest. IO Zone Write Performance, OpenSUSE and Ubuntu. JSON, OpenSUSE and Ubuntu. Go, OpenSUSE and Clear. Video encoding, Clear and FreeBSD took the first and second spot. FLAC, Clear and OpenSUSE. Blender, Clear and OpenSUSE. PHP, Clear and OpenSUSE took the first and second place. So looking at these scores, the winner here clearly was Clear Linux, won most of the benchmarks, and second place went to OpenSUSE. So I have to ask, is this surprising to any of you that those two are the top or fastest in running this Intel server platform benchmark?
Clear, no, because Intel makes Clear and it should have a good performance. And also, Clear is heavily focused on trying to get like the best performance benchmarks, like a lot. It's also not very user friendly, but there's that thing. But I am surprised that OpenSUSE is that high in the testing for all this stuff, because you kept saying Clear and OpenSUSE, Clear and OpenSUSE. It's like, yeah, that's very interesting.
It was very interesting. So third place went to CentOS. FreeBSD and Ubuntu were tied, and Windows came in dead last. Noah, I have to ask you, because I know you're a big CentOS person. Are you surprised at all?
No, I'm a little surprised. Here's the thing: CentOS tends to be a very, very light distro, and I mean, I've run CentOS with 500 I almost said 500 gigs of RAM, 512 megs of RAM. And I do that pretty regularly, actually, depending on what the job of the server is. So it's a very, very light distro out of the box, and of course you can stack as much on top of it as you want. To see OpenSUSE come in second, that surprised me. Windows being dead last, no surprise there.
Exactly.
They're coming in first, not really a surprise there.
Nice.
So up next in the show, Handshake is at it again. They've donated $300,000 to Debian. Debian received a generous donation from the Handshake company, and Debian stated that this is significant financial contribution will help Debian to continue the hardware replacement plan designed for the Debian system administrators, renewing servers and other hardware components, and thus making the development and community infrastructure of the project more reliable. This is actually really cool because Handshake isn't done here. In fact, they'll be donating upwards to $10 million to various FLOSS developers and projects, as well as nonprofit organizations and universities to support free software development and maybe Linux and open source podcasting people. So
they donated to Arch, so I love them already.
There you go. So this begs the questions: who is Handshake? So in short, Handshake is a decentralized, permissionless naming protocol compatible with DNS. It's kind of like on the blockchain type of approach, and in which every peer-to-peer is validating and in charge of managing the root zone with the goal of creating an alternative to existing certificate authorities. This is pretty interesting because it has a lot of potential to make the web more robust and more secure, because of everybody is checking to see if the certificates are authenticated or not, rather than just dealing with it, like hoping that the certificate authorities are keeping up to date with everything.
So to kind of put this in better perspective, and I know, Michael, you are going to know more about this than any of us, but from what I was able to understand, when we talk about top domains in the root zone, because a lot of this is not centralized today when it comes to websites, right? It's not a centralized thing, but when it comes to the root that they're trying to centralize here, what we're talking about is .com, .biz, those specific top-level domains, right? That's what they're referencing, switching out, utilizing blockchain. And this runs on top of the current technology so that it's not a situation where you have to choose one or the other. They're going to kind of go together.
Right. You get the benefit of having both. And you really can't replace the existing TLD structure because it's so convoluted. And it has, there's the system of the .com, .org, and .net were all created by the U.S. government and then handed off to the ICANN organization. And the ICANN organization then takes that and gives it to the registry companies or registrar companies who then sell access to them and stuff. So there's no owner of those. So having there's a lot of confusion in who gets to control that thing. So adding the stuff on top of it with this handshake approach allows you to have more secure and more make sure that the certificates are more reliable, and like they're more decentralized as well. But at the same time, like a lot of other TLDs are centralized because they're controlled by a particular entity or a particular country and all that other stuff. So for the most part, there is centralization in a way in a lot of TLDs, but the main ones that are most people that have been around the longest have some decentralization, but not on purpose. So this is a way to secure it in the sense of like make sure that the certificate authorities are more up to date and more known and reliable, without also having that layer of making sure that you don't have to worry about the massive confusion behind these different TLDs. And there's also some more stuff that ICANN's doing in like right now about basically messing up.org that's happening that is potentially going to happen, messing up.org and .biz and some other ones. So this is something that is definitely would be useful when it happens. So I'm happy that they're making it, and also happy that they're donating so much to the community, because this is just really amazing that they're taking the profits.
Heck of a fundraiser, and what it is they just had an excess of fundraising of more than they needed of $10 million, so they're giving it back to the community. But you can see how important that is, that they've raised that much money in order to implement this, because the decentralization of control of web could be very dangerous. If one company could be manipulated, it could change things entirely in the infrastructure. By moving it to blockchain, one person can't do anything, right? The entire block has to prove it. So I think it's a really cool thing that they've done here, and I will be watching this project with a lot of interest.
Yeah, you make a great point. Also because ICANN's kind of messing up .org, and .org is heavily used in nonprofits and open source communities and stuff. Even Destination Linux has a .org address, and their ICANN is basically going to allow, or is they're saying that they're going to, but people are still trying to combat that. But they're saying that they're going to allow the people who run the .org registrar stuff to basically increase the price to whatever they want. Because right now there's a lock about what a specific prices you're allowed to use to sell the .org, and they're basically trying to make it where the registrars can just pick whatever they want. So that would be very bad. Like, it makes sense that the TLDs of like .ninja could pick whatever they want because they paid to do that, whereas the .org, they didn't pay to do it, so it's much more complicated. So I'm glad, like, a handshake doing this has a lot of potential to improve some aspects of that problem.
So up next in the news, and this one I'm hoping I can kind of get Michael's attention here, because he is very passionate about this subject. But Epic Game Store is now available on Linux, which is shocking because this is the same Epic Game Store that said we have no interest in Linux.
Because they didn't do it and someone else did it.
Well, I was getting to that. You're the type of person that when you're watching the new Avengers just tells the ending.
No, I would never do that. It's just like you're basically saying, like,
I was baiting. Yes, they didn't do it. Lutris, in fact, made the Epic Game Store work on Linux. Lutris does lots of awesome things to make gaming work properly on Linux, and the Epic Game Store is now in addition to that. What I found interesting is the CEO of Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, replied to Lutris' tweet about, hey, we got Epic Game Store working on Linux using Lutris, and said, you should apply for one of our grants, and seemed to have some interest in this project, probably because he noticed all of the retweets and popularity of Lutris and thought, man, it's probably be pretty stupid of me to mess with Linux again, and maybe I'll try to jump on this. So at least they do have grants for adding features in. Is this a good step that the Epic CEO, Michael, kind of, put a little olive branch out and said, hey, this is pretty cool. Why don't you apply for a grant from us and see what we can do with it?
Lutris, great job. I'm really happy that you did this. It doesn't change my opinion of Epic. Because, like, the CEO, like, yeah, here's an olive branch. At the same time, I'm going to slap you with that branch before, because he did the thing where he said using Linux for gaming is like someone who just complained about the president of the United States getting the person they don't want and then moving to Canada. Like, we got to fix the Windows where it is now. We have to worry about what we're using now. We don't have to worry. Like, so he makes fun of Linux all the time, and he's been doing it for years. So no, I don't think that this one olive branch changes my opinion of Epic. Yes, There are some times where they do things that are good. They open sourced sort of Unreal Engine, but they didn't make it work on Linux. The community made it work on Linux. So yes, they are doing certain
They
things
just got out of the way.
Yeah, they just get, and the same thing with here. Like they had nothing to do with it, and the only reason it worked is because it's Electron based. So that there's benefits that Lutris could make it work, and all they do is kind of get out of the way for us to fix it ourselves. They don't really put the effort in themselves to do anything. So I still don't like Epic Games in that sense, but at least they're sort of willing to listen to the community when the community just refuses to listen to them and does it ourselves. So awesome. Thank you, Lutris. That is awesome. I can't wait to try some games, especially if Borderlands 3 works through this what y'all did. Amazing. So there you go. But yeah, Epic Games.
Mad love to Lutris, where the love belongs.
Exactly. Also, where some love belongs is PDF. Not really. That's weird.
You got to leave that in.
So anyway, up next in our spotlight is the PDFArranger, which is a really cool tool. It's a Python GTK-based application that allows you to merge, split, rotate, crop, and rearrange pages in a PDF. Because editing a PDF is very annoying, even if you have Adobe stuff. But it's really cool that they are making this application because it allows you to use like an interactive and intuitive graphical interface to manipulate these PDF files much more easily, and you can manage them as a lot easier as well.
Yep, absolutely. PDFArranger, having to deal with closing on a house not so long ago, and the sheer amount of PDFs that were sent that needed to be combined with other documents this is a lifesaver type of tool. If you don't use PDFs a lot, you may go, who cares? I don't need anything like this. But the moment that you do, you will be begging for, what was that application they had again that does the PDF stuff? Because it's so obnoxious otherwise. So it's a pretty cool tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our tip and trick of the week is BC. Now, BC is a command line calculator that is included with most distros but can be installed from your repository if needed. The tool allows you to be scientific, financial, or simple calculations and perform them right from the terminal. Simply type BC in the terminal to invoke your type of operation, such as 7 times 7 or 7 minus 7, and press enter. It supports addition, subtraction, multiplication, parentheses, exponents, and etc. So etc. So check that out. That is one of those tools that I had no idea existed in the command line. I'm happy to learn about it. It definitely is something I'd be willing to use. I don't know if I'm trying to think. I guess the simple just addition and subtraction. There's more times than not I bang open a calculator just to bang something out. But if I can do that from the terminal, especially with the drop-down terminal, that'd be really nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And an extra tip, KRunner has it built in too.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you can do I don't know if it's BC, but you can do calculations inside of KRunner, like the basic simple stuff.
I think you are going to have to read some of the instructions though, because by default, 22 divided by 7 is 3. So that's the answer that comes out in the terminal, whereas we all know it's 3.1415926. So, or in fact, by the calculator terminology, it's 3.1428571. It's not proper pi. So there must be some configuration in there somewhere.
It rounds up more than likely, probably.
More decimal points, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, Zeb bringing the heat.
Nice. I like it.
Math is hard.
So a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. We love our patrons and coffee supporters. We just want to give a special shout out to all of you for your continued support. We do a live show for patrons, so you can come join us live and watch this show, be a part of the show at the beginnings and the end before we start filming and recording. And you can join for just one measly little dollar you probably could find in your couch cushion, and that's darn near free, so do it.
That's right. We're now on Coffee as a way to support the show. Coffee offers a nice monthly option that allows you to have the same perks as those folks over at Patreon, except you're not a patron. You're a coffee supporter or a coffee buyer or a coffee giver.
Coffee patron.
That is not, we're not getting
we don't have time to get into it.
Triggered.
There'll be a link for this in the show notes, and you can go to our website to join Coffee. The perks include things like access to the live shows and unedited versions, as well as our sincere gratitude. So please check that out. Check the show notes for more information.
And as usual, get back to us and let us know what you think of the show. Ask any burning questions via the numerous methods. Let us know whether or not you think you are a coffee patron. And send your emails to comments@destinationlinux.org. You can comment on our Telegram group, our Discord group, Twitter, Mastodon, and other ways.
I'll be kicking people who identify as coffee patrons.
We're going to start a war between Ko-fi and Patreon members. They're all going to fight each other.
Single click and double click, isn't it?
It's the same kind of thing.
Ko-fi folks, we don't like them.
So the good news is Michael has got all these methods of contacts for Destination Linux at destinationlinux.org/contact. So please keep them coming.
Yep, and if you want to get more content, the fun doesn't stop here. We also have our own channels and podcast. Where you can check out Ryan. You find out his at youtube.com/DOSGeek, where he does videos about hardware reviews and some various different geeky things as well as tutorials. You can also check out Zeb on his YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/ZebedyBoss, where
he teaches you how to plug in a USB
He shows you how to plug in USB drives.
Which Noah needed earlier.
Right. And you can also check out my content at tuxdigital.com, and you can check out This Week in Linux podcast, where I do news, very in-depth news research around various different topics of the week. You can check out Noah's show, where it's the Ask Noah show, where he takes call-in live questions from the audience, whether it's business, tech, or Linux questions. It's a really interesting show. Check it out. Also, be sure to like that smash button and share the show on social media.
Everybody, have a great week, and remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination. Have a good week. We'll see you next Sunday.
Yep, thanks everyone.
We did it!
Sweet. Thank you, guys. That's awesome.
Dude,
Right on time.
This was like one of those movies, though, that's going along really well. Like, it's ready, you're getting ready, and all of a sudden it's finished.
It kind of is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.